My name is Caleb Oduya. I'm 31 years old, and when I was 23, my parents emptied the education fund they had spent 18 years building for me, $92,400, and handed every cent of it to my younger sister, without telling me, without asking me, without even leaving a note. I found out on a Tuesday morning in September. I remember because I was sitting in the parking lot of the financial aid office at Georgetown University School of Law, engine still running, coffee going cold in the cup holder. I had driven 40 minutes in rush hour DC traffic to sign the final paperwork that would release the first disbursement of my education fund. The woman behind the counter, a soft-spoken woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a beaded chain, looked at her screen, looked at me, and then looked at her screen again. "Mr. Oduya," she said, slowly, the way people speak when they are about to deliver news they did not ask to deliver. "This account was closed 6 weeks ago. The full balance was transferred out." The fluorescent lights buzzed. Someone's printer started somewhere behind a wall. I felt my coffee cup bend slightly in my grip. "That's not possible," I said. She turned the monitor toward me. $92,400, transferred. August 3rd. Authorized by the account co-holder. My father's name was right there on the screen. Before we get into this, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly resonates with you. Stories like this one don't find their audience by accident. They find them because someone needed to hear them. If that's you today, hit the button and drop your location and your local time in the comments right now. I'm always amazed where in the world people are watching from when their lives collide with mine. Let's go. Let me take you back to Lagos, Nigeria in the summer of 1997. I was 2 years old. My father, Emmanuel Oduya, was a civil engineer with a British postgraduate degree and the kind of ambition that made him magnetic at dinner parties and exhausting at home. My mother, Grace, was a secondary school mathematics teacher who could solve quadratic equations in her head and could not, for the life of her, say no to my father. They were not a bad couple, exactly. They were a couple who had decided, somewhere along the way, that agreement was the same thing as harmony, and that harmony was the same thing as love. We immigrated to the United States in 1999 when I was 4 and my sister Adese, Ada, everyone called her, was 1. My father had secured a position with an engineering consultancy in Silver Spring, Maryland, and we arrived with 4 suitcases, a rice cooker, and the particular brand of immigrant optimism that is indistinguishable from terror if you look closely enough. We settled into a 2-bedroom apartment in Silver Spring, then a townhouse in Rockville when I was 7, then finally a proper 4-bedroom colonial in Gaithersburg when I was 11. Each move was a marker of my father's success. Each move was also, I would come to understand, a renegotiation of the family's internal geography. Because here is the thing about Emmanuel and Grace Oduya. They loved their children. I want to say that plainly, without the comfortable ambiguity that lets people off the hook. They loved us. But love in their household was not distributed evenly. It was not even distributed intentionally. It was simply a resource that flowed, the way water flows, following the path of least resistance, pooling in the places already shaped to receive it. Ada was the place already shaped to receive it. She was born beautiful. That is the plain fact of it, and I say it without bitterness because beauty is not a moral achievement. Ada had my mother's cheekbones and my father's easy smile and a laugh that made strangers on the street turn to look. She was charming in the way that some people simply are, naturally, effortlessly, in a way that cannot be taught and probably should not be resented. And she was the baby. In Nigerian family culture, in our family's specific iteration of it, the baby was the treasure. The firstborn, me, was the investment. The investment was meant to work. I understood my role early. I was 9 years old the first time I understood it with the specific clarity of numbers. It was my birthday. A Saturday in March, my parents had taken Ada to a gymnastics competition in Annapolis. Her first real competition. She was 6, it was a big deal. And they had left me with our neighbor Mrs. Ibarra, who was kind but who smelled strongly of camphor, and whose television only received 3 channels. They had left $20 on the counter for my birthday dinner, with a note in my mother's handwriting that said, "Order pizza, we'll celebrate when we're back." They came back at 9:30. Ada had won a participation ribbon. There was a cake, a small store-bought one, and my father put 9 candles on it and they sang to me. My mother took a photograph. Everyone smiled. I told myself it didn't hurt. I was good at that. When I was 12, I made the academic decathlon team at Robert Frost Middle School. It was a significant thing. Our school had never sent a team to the state competition, and the coach, a lanky man named Mr. Peterson who wore the same brown cardigan every day, told my parents that I had scored higher on the qualifying exam than any student he'd coached in 11 years. The state competition was in Philadelphia. The entry fee was $40 per student, and there was a hotel stay involved, and my parents said they couldn't afford it. This was 2007. My father had recently been promoted. We had just refinished the basement. The reason they couldn't afford it was that Ada had been enrolled in a private gymnastics academy in Potomac that cost $1,100 a month. I didn't go to Philadelphia. The team went without me. They came in third. I told myself it didn't matter. There would be other things. The clearest memory, though, the one I still return to with a kind of grim precision, is from when I was 15. My parents sat me down at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and told me something that I want to describe exactly as it happened, because the exact language matters. My father put his hands flat on the table, which was his signal that he was about to say something he'd rehearsed. He told me that they had opened an education fund for me when I was born, a custodial investment account managed through Fidelity with both my father's and my grandfather's initial contributions and steady additions over the years. He told me that they had been building it for 15 years and that by the time I was ready for university, it would be enough to cover law school, if that was the path I chose, and that they hoped it was because the Oduya family needed a lawyer the way a house needs a foundation. He said that the Oduya family needs a lawyer the way a house needs a foundation. My mother smiled and patted my hand. She said, "We believe in you, Caleb." I remember how it felt. I remember the particular warmth of it, the way it landed in my chest like a coal settling. Someone had planned for me. Someone had been thinking about my future in a concrete, financial, specific way for 15 years. I was the investment, and the investment was real, and it had a dollar amount attached to it, and that dollar amount was proof of something I had needed proof of my whole life. "How much?" I asked. "Almost 50,000 now," my father said. "By the time you need it, more." I went upstairs and cried into my pillow, not from sadness, but from a species of relief I had never felt before. I was 15 years old, and someone had bet on me. I should have paid more attention to who else was at that table. Ada was 14. She had been listening from the hallway. I didn't know that then. I know it now. I was not a kid who coasted on the promise of that fund. If anything, knowing it existed made me work harder, because I was terrified of being the person who wasted it. I graduated from Richard Montgomery High School in 2011 with a 4.1 GPA and a stack of extracurriculars that my guidance counselor, Miss Tolliver, called almost aggressively comprehensive. I had been captain of the debate team, editor of the school newspaper, a volunteer paralegal at a legal aid clinic in Wheaton, and I had worked 16 hours a week at a Panera Bread on Rockville Pike every Friday and Saturday since I was 16. I got into the University of Maryland on a partial academic scholarship. I want to be clear about the Panera job because it matters later. I was not working at Panera because I needed to. My parents were comfortable. I was working because I had decided, quietly and entirely on my own, that I would use every dollar I earned to pay for my own undergraduate expenses: books, transportation, the laptop I bought sophomore year, spring break, the LSAT prep course, my suits for mock trial. And I would leave the education fund untouched, growing, so that when the time came for law school, it would be as large as possible. I never told my parents I was doing this. It was not a gesture designed to be seen. It was just what I believed the responsible version of myself should do. My undergraduate years at Maryland were 4 of the best years of my life. And I say that knowing that the bar was not especially high going in. I had roommates who became brothers: Marcus Webb from Philadelphia, Tomas Guerrero from El Paso, and a quietly intense guy from Seoul named Jinho Park, who is now a cardiologist at Johns Hopkins and still owes me $40 from a 2013 pizza bet. I joined the Pre-Law Society. I interned at a downtown D.C. litigation firm the summer after my junior year. I took the LSAT in October of my senior year and scored a 173 on my first attempt, which put me in the 99th percentile nationally. Georgetown University Law Center accepted me with a small merit scholarship in February 2015. I called my parents from the parking lot of the library. My mother cried. My father said, "I knew it, I always knew it." And he had, in his way. He had funded the knowing of it for 18 years. Ada, meanwhile, had abandoned gymnastics at 17, an injury to her left ankle, nothing catastrophic, but enough to end competitive ambitions, and had enrolled at Towson University to study communications. My parents paid her tuition in full, which was reasonable. It was the same fund they would have used for me at the undergraduate level, except I had taken the scholarship instead and paid my own way through Panera paychecks and summer internship stipends. Ada also lived at home, drove the car my parents bought her for her 18th birthday, a 2014 Honda CR-V in pearl white. I can tell you the color because I helped my father pick it up from the dealership, and worked part-time at a boutique in Bethesda that her friend's mother owned, keeping most of that money for herself because her living expenses were effectively zero. None of this felt at the time like a problem. Ada and I were not close. We were too different, too shaped by our different positions in the family, but we were not enemies. We texted occasionally. We sat at the same table at Christmas. She came to my law school graduation party in our backyard in June 2018. She wore a yellow dress, and she laughed a lot, and she hugged me and said, "I'm so proud of you, Caleb." And I believed her. I still believe she meant it, in the way you can mean something and also simultaneously be doing something that contradicts it entirely. If you've ever had someone in your life who could love you genuinely while also taking from you without remorse, drop a broken heart in the comments. Because that particular combination of warmth and harm is one of the most disorienting things a person can experience, and I want to know how many of us are sitting here with that specific kind of scar. Let me tell you about the summer of 2018. I had been accepted to Georgetown Law. I had deferred for 1 year to work as a paralegal at a firm in Bethesda and save additional money, and I was preparing to start in the fall of my delayed enrollment. I was 23. I was organized. I had a spreadsheet, yes, an actual Excel spreadsheet, that mapped out my finances through all 3 years of law school: the education fund, my savings, the merit scholarship, projected summer associate income, cost of living in D.C., a small emergency reserve. I was the kind of person who had a spreadsheet. I was the kind of person who kept receipts. What I did not have, and what I had never thought to secure, was any formal documentation giving me direct control over the education fund, because it was a custodial account, an UMA account, Uniform Gifts to Minors Act. The legal custodian was my father. The account had been opened in my name, the contributions had been made for my benefit, and everyone in the family understood this. It was, in every way that mattered to any of us, my money. But on paper, in the language that banks and financial institutions speak, my father had the authority to do whatever he wished with it until I was 21, and after 21, while I technically had the right to take control, no one had ever explicitly transferred that control to me. I had never thought to ask. Why would I? The fund was for law school. Law school was in September. The math was obvious to everyone, or so I thought. Here is what I did not know that summer. Ada, who had graduated from Towson in May 2018 with a degree in communications and a vague idea of maybe working in PR or something, had begun in the preceding months to develop a more specific idea. She wanted to open a hair salon, not just any hair salon, a boutique natural hair salon in downtown Bethesda targeting professional Black women, a real business with a proper lease and professional equipment, and a staff of trained stylists and a brand identity that she had apparently been working on for months without telling anyone outside our immediate family. She had done her research. She had a business plan of sorts. She had a name, Audaces, in cursive, which was either charming or on the nose depending on your perspective. She had a friend with a cosmetology license and a passion for natural hair care. She had enthusiasm and a genuine eye for aesthetics and approximately $0 in startup capital. And she had, it appeared, the ear of our parents. I don't know exactly when the conversation happened. I have pieced it together from fragments, from things my mother let slip 18 months later, from things Ada told me herself during the confrontation I'll describe shortly, from the timeline visible in the bank records I eventually obtained. What I know is this. Sometime between June and late July of 2018, Ada presented her business plan to our parents. She told them she needed approximately $80,000 to $90,000 to lease a commercial space, complete the build-out, purchase salon furniture and equipment, cover initial payroll, and maintain operating capital through the first 6 months. She told them she had done the math. She told them this was a real opportunity, that the Bethesda market was underserved, that she had a mentor who had run a successful salon in Rockville for 12 years who believed in her. My father looked at the numbers. He looked at the education fund. He made a decision. He did not call me. He did not text me. He did not sit me down at the kitchen table with his hands flat on the surface the way he had when he told me the fund existed. He did not write me a letter or send an email or ask my mother to reach out. He drove to the Fidelity branch on Rockville Pike on August 3, 2018, signed the transfer authorization, and moved $92,400, the full balance, into a joint checking account with Ada's name on it. And then he went home and had dinner, and apparently said nothing. 6 weeks later, I found out from Patricia and her beaded reading glasses. Type August 3rd in the comments if you just felt that in your chest. Because even now, 13 years later, I hear that date and I feel the parking lot, and the cold coffee, and the fluorescent hum. I sat in my car for 45 minutes. I know it was 45 minutes because when I finally looked at my phone, there were 2 missed calls from Marcus. We had plans to get lunch in Adams Morgan, and it was 11:17 and I had arrived at 9:45. I did not cry. I want to be accurate about this. I did not cry. I did not yell. I did not hit anything. I sat in my car in a parking lot in Georgetown, and I breathed, and I looked at the dashboard, and I tried to understand what had just happened. Then I called my father. He picked up on the second ring. He was at work. I could hear the ambient sound of the engineering office, the low percussion of keyboards, someone laughing in the distance. "Caleb," he said, the way he always said my name, as though verifying an entry in a ledger. "Dad," I said, "I'm at Georgetown. At the financial aid office. There's a problem with the education fund." There was a pause, not a long one, maybe 3 seconds, but in those 3 seconds I learned something about my father that I think I had always known and never allowed myself to articulate. In those 3 seconds he did not say what, or "that's strange," or "let me call the bank." He said nothing at all. And then he said, "Caleb, I need you to come home. I need you to tell me what happened to the money," I said. "Come home. We can talk about this properly. Dad, tell me right now." Another pause. And then, very quietly, my father said, "We had to make a decision. It was a family decision. Please come home so we can explain." I hung up. I drove to Gaithersburg. It took me an hour and 20 minutes in afternoon traffic, and I remember exactly 4 things about that drive. A billboard for a personal injury lawyer on I-270 that said, "We fight for you." The smell of the air freshener I'd clipped to my vent the week before. The way my hands felt very steady on the steering wheel, even though some part of me expected them to shake. And a single thought that repeated itself for the entire drive with the patience and regularity of a metronome. They took it. They took it. They took it. My parents were both home. They were sitting in the living room when I walked in, which meant they had arranged themselves there, which meant this had been rehearsed. My mother had her hands in her lap. My father was sitting forward in his chair, elbows on his knees. Ada was not there. I would learn later that they had specifically asked her not to be. "Sit down, Caleb," my mother said. "I'll stand," I said. And then my father explained it. Slowly, carefully, using the measured tone of a man who had practiced this speech and was disappointed to be delivering it, but not, I noticed, ashamed. He told me about Ada's salon. He told me the amount. He told me they believed in her vision. He told me that the family needed to support her right now, at this critical juncture, and that they knew I would understand because I was the strong one, because I was resourceful, because I had always found a way. He said the word resourceful, and I watched him say it, and I felt something move in me that was not anger, exactly, but was the thing that lives just below anger, in the cooler, more permanent register. "You could get loans," my mother said. "Lots of students get loans. You'll pay them back easily with a lawyer's salary." "I worked," I said. "I worked at Panera for 4 years, instead of taking your money for college so that fund would be bigger." A silence. "We didn't know you did that," my mother said. "It doesn't matter," my father said, and then seemed to realize immediately that it did in fact matter enormously, and he looked at the carpet. "Did you consider," I said, and my voice was very quiet. "I want you to understand how quiet I was. I was not raising my voice. I was not breaking things. I was just a 23-year-old man standing in his parents' living room, asking a factual question. Did you consider asking me once, a phone call, an email, anything? Before you took $92,000 that you spent 18 years telling me was mine." My mother looked at my father. My father looked at his hands. "We thought you'd say no," he said. I looked at him for a long moment. I nodded once. And then I walked out of the house and I drove back to my apartment in Silver Spring, and I did not speak to either of my parents for 11 months. The next phase of my life is not a sad story, even though it began from a place of damage. I want to be clear about this because I have told this story to friends and colleagues over the years, and some of them assume that the next section must be the suffering section, the years of hardship montage, the character-building adversity sequence. And there was hardship. I am not going to pretend there wasn't. But it was not a sad story, because I did not decide to make it one. In the weeks following August 2018, I did several practical things. I contacted Georgetown's financial aid office and met with a counselor named Dr. Anita Raj, who had, I suspect, seen this specific situation more times than she liked to admit. I applied for federal Graduate Plus loans. I applied for private loans through 2 lenders. I wrote 4 separate scholarship applications in the space of 2 weeks. I got a part-time job as a research assistant for a constitutional law professor named Dr. Ellison Webb, who wore bow ties and argued every point as though it were a Supreme Court case, and who would, years later, become one of the most important mentors of my professional life. I called Marcus. I called Tomas. I called Jinho. I told them what happened plainly without embellishment, and they listened. "What do you need?" Marcus asked. "Nothing," I said. "I just needed to say it out loud." "Okay," he said. "Now let's talk about how we get you through 3 years of law school." I want to pause here and say something directly to you. If you have people in your life who respond to your worst news with the question, "What do you need?" hold on to them with everything you have. Blood is not water. It is not even close to water. It is a specific kind of loyalty forged by choice and sustained by action, and you do not need to share chromosomes with someone to have it. And sharing chromosomes with someone does not guarantee you will ever have it from them. Drop a crown in the comments if you have chosen family who showed up for you the way Marcus showed up for me that fall, because those people deserve to be named, even if we're the only ones who know who they are. Law school was hard. I will not romanticize it or dramatize it beyond what it was. It was genuinely, comprehensively difficult. The workload, the debt accumulating in real time, the occasional 2 a.m. moments when I would open my loan dashboard and feel the number sitting there like a stone on my chest. $116,000 by the time I graduated. $131,000 with interest accrual through the bar period. I know these numbers because I tracked them the same way I tracked everything, on the same spreadsheet, updated monthly, a record of what had been taken and what it had cost me to build again from the floor. But I also made law review. I won the moot court championship in my second year. I summered at a major litigation firm in D.C., a firm in a glass tower on Pennsylvania Avenue, where I wore the suits I'd bought with my own money and learned more in 10 weeks than I had in some entire semesters of coursework. They gave me a full-time offer in October of my second year, which I accepted. I graduated in May 2021, the middle of the pandemic, a ceremony on a lawn with masks and strategic spacing, and I passed the bar on my first attempt in July. I started work at Morrison & Clark LLP in September 2021 as a first-year associate in the litigation group. My starting salary was $205,000, not including bonus. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. Not because I'm boasting. I don't believe in boasting. I believe in accounting. But because I want you to understand the arithmetic of what my parents did and did not do. They took $92,000 that was mine and gave it to my sister. They cost me the equivalent of $131,000 in debt, plus interest, plus the years it would take to repay it. And they created a lawyer who was, by every measurable standard, more driven, more focused, and more financially literate than he might have been if everything had simply gone according to plan. I do not think they intended this. I do not think suffering is a gift, but I do think that when you take someone's scaffolding away, you find out very quickly whether they know how to build without it. I bought a 2-bedroom condo in Logan Circle in October 2022. Cash down payment. A real down payment, a substantial one, from the bonus I received for my work on a major antitrust matter. I put my own name on the deed. I stood in the empty living room the afternoon I got the keys, and I thought about a parking lot in Georgetown and a woman named Patricia with reading glasses on a beaded chain. And I felt something that I can only describe as the specific piece of a circle not yet closed, but finally becoming round. During these years, law school, bar exam, the early associate years, my relationship with my parents moved through several distinct phases. The 11 months of total silence ended not with a reconciliation, but with a phone call from my mother in July 2019, on my birthday, during which she said happy birthday and nothing else of substance, and I thanked her, and the call lasted 4 minutes. We resumed a thin, careful contact after that, the annual birthday calls. A brief exchange at Christmas 2019 that my father and I both treated with the formality of opposing counsel meeting in a courthouse hallway. I did not go home for the holidays in 2020. The pandemic made this easy to justify. Or in 2021. I attended my mother's sister's funeral in 2022 via Zoom, which my father considered an insult, and which I considered a practical decision about grief and geography and personal safety. Ada and I had not spoken at all since the day I left the house in Gaithersburg. I had not blocked her. Blocking implies ongoing contact worth preventing. I had simply not initiated, and she had not tried. She had opened the salon in October 2018. It was called, as planned, Audaces, and my parents sent me a text with a photograph of the sign on opening day. I did not respond to the text. I looked at the photograph for a long time. The sign was well designed, the logo was clean. I had to acknowledge, internally and only to myself, that Ada had taste, genuine aesthetic intelligence, and that the salon looked like a place I might, in another life, have been proud of her for building. Audaces struggled in its first year. My mother mentioned this once, obliquely, in one of our strained phone calls. Ada is having some challenges, the business world is not easy. And I said, in a way that communicated neither sympathy nor schadenfreude, because I had made a private decision not to have feelings about Ada's salon one way or the other. It was not my money anymore. The moment my father signed that transfer, it became Ada's money. What she did with it was her responsibility and her story, and I did not want her story inside mine. What I did not know, through all of this, was that my parents were watching, not in the intrusive sense. We were not in close enough contact for surveillance to be relevant, but in the sense that parents always watch, always track, always measure the distance between what they hoped for and what they caused. My father, I would eventually learn, had subscribed to the Georgetown Law alumni newsletter. He had noticed when my name appeared in a Washington Post article about a significant antitrust ruling my firm had worked on. A small mention, but a mention. My mother had, without telling me, found my LinkedIn profile and checked it monthly. They were watching me become successful from the distance their choice had created, and I do not know whether this made them proud or guilty or both, and honestly I did not think about it much because I had my own life to build, and theirs was not my concern. And then Ada called me. It was a Friday evening in March 2024. I was at my condo, home from work, changing out of my suit, when my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. And then, when I picked up, a voice I recognized immediately. "Caleb," she said. "It's me. It's Ada." Silence. Not long. Maybe 5 seconds. "I know who it is," I said. "I know I don't have the right to call you," she said. "I know that. But something's happening and I need you to know. And I need to hear your voice. Is that okay?" It was not okay, exactly. But I didn't hang up. "Talk," I said. And Ada talked. For 45 minutes, without drama, without deflection, with a kind of exhausted directness that surprised me. She told me the salon had done well, that she had found her footing after the first difficult year, that she now had 6 stylists and a loyal client base, and a wait list for bookings. She told me she had hired an accountant, a business attorney, a proper bookkeeper. She told me she had paid herself back the full $92,000 from salon profits, which she had then put in a separate account, and that she wanted me to know this because she had been holding it like a stone in her chest for 6 years. She told me our parents were not well. My father had been diagnosed with type 2 diabetes in 2022 and had been managing it poorly. My mother had developed significant anxiety and was seeing a therapist twice a week, partly about her anxiety and partly, the therapist had suggested, about unresolved family matters that my mother could not bring herself to address directly. "They talk about you every day," Ada said. "That's not an exaggeration. Every single day. Dad reads every article he can find about your cases. Mom has a photo of you at your law school graduation on the mantle, next to mine from Towson." I didn't say anything. "I think they're ashamed," Ada said. "I think they've been ashamed for a long time, and they don't know how to start. And I think I've been ashamed too, and I didn't know how to start either, and that's why I called." She paused. "I didn't know they were going to do it," she said. "I want you to know that. I told them I needed funding. I didn't ask them to take it from you. When I found out where the money came from, I didn't—" She stopped. "That's not an excuse. I know it's not an excuse. I took the money anyway, and I built my business with your money, and I've had to live with that." I was quiet for a long time. "How are you?" I finally asked. And I meant it. I meant it in the way you ask someone a question when you've missed them and wished things were different, and have no idea how to begin the enormous work of making them different. Ada let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "I don't know," she said. "Better for having called you. How are you?" "I'm good," I said. "I'm genuinely good." "I know," she said. "I've been watching." What happened next unfolded over 3 months, slowly, the way things unfold when people are being careful. Ada and I began texting. Small things at first, a funny article, a reaction to a TV show, the gradual re-establishment of a sibling frequency that had been dormant for nearly 6 years. She told me more about the salon, which I asked about with genuine curiosity that surprised me. I told her about a particularly difficult case I was working on, a major piece of commercial litigation involving a pharmaceutical company, the details of which I cannot share, but the broad shape of which kept me in the office until 9 or 10 on most weeknights. We were not, in those 3 months, back to whatever we might have been before. We were 2 adults who had been strangers to each other for 6 years, and who were beginning, carefully, to remember why they had once known each other's voices. In June 2024, Ada told me she had spoken to our parents and that they wanted to meet with me. Not a family dinner, not a holiday gathering, a specific, intentional meeting, at a restaurant, not at the house, on neutral ground, to have a conversation they had been avoiding for 6 years. She asked if I would come. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 weeks. I talked to Dr. Simone Reeves, a therapist I had been seeing since 2020, who has the very useful quality of never telling me what to do, but who asks questions that make it impossible not to know what I already think. I talked to Marcus, who said, "What do you want the next 10 years to look like? Build from there." I talked to Dr. Ellison Webb over coffee, who surprised me by saying, "The best closing arguments I've seen aren't the ones where the lawyer destroys the other side. They're the ones where the lawyer makes the jury understand." I talked, most usefully, to myself, in writing, in the journal I've kept since law school. Not a feelings journal exactly, more of a record of decisions and reasoning. The kind of document you could theoretically present in court if your life were put on trial. And I decided I would go. The restaurant was a West African place in Silver Spring called Echo Kitchen. Ada had chosen it, and I understood why, because it was her way of putting us all on our own cultural ground, a kind of equalizer. I arrived first, on purpose, 7 minutes early. I got a table near the window and ordered water and studied the menu I already knew I wasn't going to be able to taste properly. My parents walked in at 7 on the dot. My father had aged significantly since I had last seen him in person. The diabetes was visible in his face, a kind of gray tightening around the edges of his features that was hard to look at. My mother looked the same but smaller somehow, as though 6 years of something heavy had compressed her slightly. She was wearing the silver earrings I had given her for her 50th birthday, the last birthday I had celebrated with them in person. And I noticed this immediately and filed it away in the part of myself that keeps track of things that matter. Ada came in 2 minutes after them. She was taller than I remembered, or maybe just more upright. The posture of someone who had built something real. We sat down, we ordered, the food came, and for several minutes nobody said anything of consequence because nobody knew how to start. And then my father put his hands flat on the table, that old gesture, the rehearsed speech gesture, and I felt something creak open in my chest. "Caleb," he said. He stopped. He tried again. "Caleb," he said, "I have been trying to write this for 6 years, and everything I write sounds like an excuse, and I'm not here to give you excuses. I'm here to say that what we did, what I did, was wrong. It was wrong. I made a decision with your money without your knowledge or your consent, and I justified it to myself as a family decision, and there is no family decision that overrides what I did to you, and I know that now, and I have known it for a very long time." Silence. The table behind us was laughing about something. Someone's child was banging gently on a high chair. The restaurant smelled like jollof rice and grilled plantain and the particular sweetness of agassi soup that I associate with childhood, with the kitchen in Gaithersburg, with everything that was good about growing up Oduya before I understood the entire shape of it. My mother reached across the table and put her hand over mine. "I let it happen," she said. "I didn't push back. I told myself your father knew best. I told myself you were strong. I used your strength against you, Caleb, and I'm sorry. I'm deeply, deeply sorry." 5 seconds of silence. I counted them, and then Ada said, quietly, "I should have said no when I found out. I should have said I don't want it if it came from him. I didn't. I told myself it was already done. It wasn't. I had a choice and I made the wrong one. I'm sorry, Caleb." I looked at my father. I looked at my mother. I looked at Ada. I had prepared for this conversation the way I prepare for depositions, not to win but to be precise. I had a legal pad in my bag with 3 pages of notes, which I did not take out, because it turned out I didn't need them. What I needed was the thing I had practiced most, which was not anger and not forgiveness and not righteous triumph, but honesty. Clear, specific, direct honesty. "I need you to understand," I said, "not because I want you to feel worse than you already do, but because I don't think it's possible to move forward from something that hasn't been fully named. What you took from me was not just money. You know that. The money was $131,000 by the time I finished paying it back. That's what the interest cost me. That's what your decision cost me in dollars. I can tell you that number and it has no emotional charge for me anymore. I've paid it, it's gone. What it cost me that isn't measurable is that I went into the most important educational undertaking of my life already injured. I went in already knowing that the people who were supposed to be in my corner had made a private decision that my future was worth less than my sister's present. That is what you cost me, not the money, the certainty. My father was looking at the table. I'm not going to tell you I forgive you today, I said. That would be dishonest, and I think we've had enough dishonesty. What I'm going to tell you is that I'm here. I showed up, and that means I'm willing to find out whether forgiveness is possible, which is more than you probably deserve and more than I was willing to offer 2 years ago. So I am asking you in return for one thing, not an apology. You've given me those and I've heard them. What I'm asking for is a change in how this family operates going forward. No more decisions made about shared things without the people affected being at the table. No more assuming that someone's strength means they don't need to be consulted. No more of the thing where one child's needs are treated as more urgent and more real than the others. That's what I need. My mother was crying. Not dramatically. Not the heaving movie kind, but the quiet, continuous kind. The kind that a person cries when they are not performing grief, but simply experiencing it. My father raised his head and looked at me for a long moment. Okay, he said. Not yes, of course, and not I promise, and not any of the phrases that make promises that dissolve. Just okay, flat, clean, like a signature on a document. Ada put her hand on my arm, not grabbing, not pressing, just a hand on my arm, the way you lean against something solid when your legs are less certain than they usually are. We ate dinner. We ordered dessert. At some point around 9 o'clock, my father started telling a story about a project he was working on, something about a bridge design in Montgomery County. And I asked 2 or 3 questions about it because I was genuinely curious, because my father is, despite everything, a brilliant engineer, and the story was interesting. My mother told me about her sister's grandchildren. Ada showed me photographs of the salon's interior. She had renovated it in 2023, a significant upgrade, new furniture, better lighting, a private room for scalp treatments. It was beautiful. I told her so. She looked surprised that I meant it. When we got up to leave, my father put his arms around me in the parking lot, and I let him. He held on longer than I expected. That was the thing that surprised me most. Not the apology, not the dinner, not the careful words, but the fact that my father, Emmanuel Oduya, who had spent 60 years treating physical affection as a resource to be rationed, held onto his son in a parking lot in Silver Spring for what was probably 20 seconds, and felt like much longer. And his shoulders moved once, just once, in a way that I recognized. I drove home. I sat in my car in the Logan Circle garage for a minute. I thought about a different parking lot. I thought about Patricia and her reading glasses. I thought about the Oduya family needing a lawyer the way a house needs a foundation. We needed a foundation. We just hadn't known yet who would have to build it, or what it would cost. I am sitting in my condo in Logan Circle as I tell you this. It's a Tuesday morning in February 2026. Outside the window, I can see the rooftops of the neighborhood and a pale winter sky with the particular thin light that DC gets in February. Not quite gray, not quite blue, the color of a thing that has survived and is choosing what to become next. I have a mug of coffee on my desk. On the wall is a framed print that Jinho gave me when I passed the bar. A line from a Langston Hughes poem that I cannot reproduce here, but that I look at on difficult mornings and feel the weight of leave my shoulders. Next to it is a photograph from the night of my law firm's recent senior associate promotion announcement. There are 4 of us in the photo, all grinning, all holding champagne. I look in that photo like a person who has arrived somewhere and knows where they are. I am 31 years old. I am a senior associate at one of the finest litigation firms in Washington, D.C. I have a condo with my name on the deed. I have Marcus and Tomas and Jinho, and a therapist named Dr. Reeves, and a mentor named Dr. Webb, and a community of friends and colleagues who know my name and trust my judgment. I have Ada's number in my phone, and a standing plan to have lunch at Ada Acey's whenever I'm in Bethesda on a Friday. My parents and I speak once a week, Saturday mornings. My mother tells me about her week. My father asks about my cases in the vague way of someone who doesn't fully understand the details, but is very interested in the outcome. We have not fully repaired things. I don't know that we ever fully will, but repair is not the same as restoration, and I have stopped wanting restoration. Restoration would mean returning to what we were, and what we were was a family with a hidden fault line that we were all too afraid to name. What I want instead is construction, something built from what actually happened, not from a pretense that it didn't. I think about the money sometimes, not with anger. The anger burned clean years ago, and what was left beneath it was something more like clarity. I think about what it meant that my father looked at $92,000 earmarked for my future and saw it as movable. I think about what it meant that my mother watched him move it and said nothing. I think about what it meant that I, at 23, in a parking lot with a cold cup of coffee, had to begin rebuilding a future that had already been built once, entirely with other people's faith in me, only to be dismantled by the very people who built it. And then I think about what I actually became because of that rebuilding. I think about Dr. Ellison Webb and his bow ties. I think about the research assistantship that introduced me to constitutional litigation, which became the practice area I chose. I think about the late nights in the law school library with Marcus on FaceTime from Philadelphia, both of us bleary and caffeinated and stubborn. I think about the moment in the summer after second year, when I stood in a glass tower on Pennsylvania Avenue in a suit I had bought with money I had earned, and I understood with a certainty I could not have arrived at any other way that I did not need anyone's permission to be excellent, that I had never needed it, that I had only needed to stop waiting for it. This is not a revenge story. I want to be very clear about that. I did not build my career to prove something to my parents. I did not buy my condo to show them what they had cost me. I did not spend 6 years becoming a litigator so that I could one day sit at a table in a West African restaurant in Silver Spring and enumerate my achievements like exhibits in a case. The success was never about them. The success was always about me, about what I knew I was capable of, about what I owed to the version of myself that sat in the parking lot and chose to keep going. What I want to leave you with is this, and I want to say it plainly because I think it matters. There is a difference between the family you come from and the life you build. You do not control the first. You entirely control the second. Some people are handed a foundation, and they build. Some people have their foundation taken away, and they build anyway. From the ground, from scratch, from the particular bedrock of their own refusal to become a story that ends in the parking lot. If you are the kind of person who has been told, explicitly or implicitly, in words or in action, that your future is less important than someone else's present, I want you to hear this. That message is about the people who delivered it, not about the truth of who you are. Other people's choices about you are not your identity. They are simply the conditions you were handed. And conditions, unlike identity, can be changed. This isn't revenge. This is architecture. And the beautiful thing about building your own architecture is that you get to decide who lives in it. Type architecture in the comments if this landed for you. I mean it. I read every single one.